Without further ado, I'd love to welcome Dr. Yami. She is a board-certified pediatrician, certified lifestyle medicine physician, and a member and a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics. She is a passionate promoter of healthy lifestyles, especially the power of plant-based diets for the prevention of chronic disease. She founded VeggieFitKids.com, where she provides information on plant-based diets for children. And I'm a huge fan of her podcast, Veggie Doctor Radio, and I've been a guest on there as well. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Yami, and you should be able to share your slides now.
Hello, thank you, Rohini, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much to Rohini for inviting me, Dr. Bassam, and everybody from the Plant-Based Health Professionals UK. So here is my presentation, and I'm going to be talking about plant-based diets in children. So thank you all for coming. Today I'm going to be covering the safety, benefits, and some special considerations. So what's the issue? The issue is that, at least in the United States, we have 9.7 million Americans that are now eating a plant-based diet, but 8% of the world population consumes some sort of vegetarian, vegan diet. And I looked up the stats last week. 1.16% of people in Great Britain are vegan. And so we have all of these people, adults especially, that are eating this way, but they're wondering if it's appropriate for their children. They're concerned that maybe it's inadequate. And then we have also physicians, primary care physicians, generalists, family physicians, and pediatricians that are discouraging plant-based diets because they're afraid of nutritional deficiencies. And in addition to that, we have parents that are worried that their kids aren't eating enough in general, aren't eating enough vegetables, and so they use counterproductive strategies. And finally, size and weight bias can influence physicians and parents. So the 4 learning objectives for today's presentation is to recognize that a whole food plant-based diet is safe and beneficial for children, describe the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet for children, describe also the potential pitfalls and supplements that are required for children on plant-based diets. But finally, I also want you to know how to discuss intuitive eating principles and how that can be combined with a whole food plant-based diet in the feeding of children. So this is me and my youngest son, Desta, for Halloween. And I just want to make clear that when I am either with my own children as a mother, coaching clients, when I do my health and wellness coaching, or as a primary care pediatrician, I have 3 main goals. The first one is to promote health and well-being. I want children, I want my clients, I want them to feel good. The second one is to decrease the risk of chronic disease and promote longevity. So why not live a long and healthy life? And then third, I want to make sure that I am fostering body and eating confidence. So it doesn't matter how healthy we are and what we're eating if we are anxious or depressed because of our body weight or size. So first of all, is it safe? So we have a mama bird here feeding her baby birds, and one of the baby birds says, "Is there a vegan option?" So I want to ask you, what do you think? Is a whole food plant-based diet dangerous for children? True or false? Obviously false, because otherwise I wouldn't be giving this presentation. So a whole food plant-based diet is not dangerous for children. And I have several quotes here from large organizations, the British Dietetic Association, that well-planned plant-based diets can support healthy living at every age and life stage. And then the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics here based in the United States, appropriately planned vegetarian, including vegan diets are healthy, nutritionally adequate, and provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. These diets are appropriate for all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, adolescence, older adulthood, and for athletes. So that pretty much covers everybody. However, we have the Canadians that are on board too. Again, they say well-planned vegetarian, vegan diets, with appropriate attention and all stages of fetal, infant, child, and adolescent growth. That's from 2010. And then this is from 2018, this Vegan Nutrition for Mothers and Children, Practical Tools for Healthcare Providers, actually came out of Italy. And again, a lot of the same words are used: well-planned vegan diets when based on a variety of plant foods and excluding all animal derivatives, all stages of life, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, and childhood. Okay, so we've established that it is safe. I also want to emphasize that milk is not necessary, but also point out the fact that they kept saying that one thing over and over again, like well-planned, variety, adequate, those kinds of things. So we want to encourage and emphasize a variety of whole plant foods where possible, and pay special attention to supplementation, which I'll cover later. When it comes to growth, vegan children, plant-based children do have normal growth and development. There's been several studies that show that final adult heights are similar to omnivores. However, there was a study that came out, I think about 3 years ago, that got a lot of press, and it was studying the difference between cow's milk and non-cow milk in toddlers. But just to be aware that the non-cow milk also included goat's milk, and they followed them over time, and they found that at age 3, the children that consumed the non-cow milk were about 1.5 centimeters for the US, that's 0.6 inches shorter at age 3, but this was not final adult height. And they also pointed out that there are measurable differences in IGF-1 in the bloodstreams of children that are consuming cow's milk. They have higher IGF-1 that they are getting from the milk. So this may be affecting that height at that age. However, the question is, do we want our 3-year-olds to be on average 1.5 centimeters taller by giving them IGF-1 from cows? That's the question you need to think about. The other thing we know is when it comes to comparing plant-based children to other children, plant-based children tend to be leaner, but they're not unhealthily lean. So they do tend to be leaner than other kids. So, I asked the question, is it safe to raise children on a plant-based diet? But I also want to pose another question to you. Is it safe to raise children on a milk-based diet, drinking milk? So we know from a review study that came out at the beginning of this year, I think it was February, it was very well done, very nicely laid out, that there are a lot of risks to drinking milk, especially whenever it gets into the higher levels, which there are many toddlers that start drinking a lot of milk. So increased exposure to that IGF-1, insulin growth factor 1, like I was talking about before, increased exposure to progesterone, estrogens, other hormones, potential exposure to infectious agents in milk, especially for milk that's not pasteurized. The dairy fat increases cardiovascular disease risk, increased prostate cancer risk, increased endometrial cancer risk. 4% of little babies are going to have cow's milk protein allergy, where they're going to have bleeding in their stool, fussiness, colic, those kinds of things. Atopic disease like eczema. And compared to those that drink milk and don't drink milk, those that are consuming milk in their diet tend to have increased total mortality rates. But at the end of the day, the whole reason we've been pushing milk for decades is to build this strong bone thing, right? Well, when it comes down to it, the studies show that there is no decrease in hip fracture rate overall when they're looking at the total studies, looking at them in comparison in this review study. So really, if it's not really doing what we thought it was doing, but it's giving us all of these potential adverse effects, I would argue that it's not safe to raise our children drinking milk. So let's talk about the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet. Here's big sister talking to little brother. When mom said you should eat a lot of green stuff, I don't think she meant grasshoppers. So why whole foods in general? So we know that whole foods are foods as close to as you can find in nature in their most whole form. They have more nutrients, decreased calorie density, and no additives. But in opposition, processed foods are going to have less nutrients, increased calorie density, and often have additives like sugar, salt, fat, preservatives, and enhancers. But why plants in particular? Because as we know, we can eat whole foods that are animal products as well, but animal products or anything that's derived from an animal is missing this other stuff that's also really important. Antioxidants, vitamins and nutrients, fiber, which is my very favorite F word, and water. When it comes to disease prevention of a whole food plant-based diet, I'm sure many of you guys already know this, but I just want to reiterate. Whole food plant-based diet has been shown to have many health benefits: decreased risk of cardiovascular disease, including hypertension, coronary heart disease, stroke, diabetes type 2, digestive conditions like constipation, inflammatory bowel disease, dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and several different types of cancers. And why is that? It's because whenever you're eating a diet that is high in whole plant foods, you're going to have more polyphenols, more fiber, improved endothelial cell function, decreased TMAO production, decreased cholesterol, similar to statin therapy. If you're eating a plant-based diet, the effect can be similar to being on a medication for cholesterol, improved insulin sensitivity, decreased blood sugars, decreased blood pressure, both the systolic and diastolic aspects, and decreased body weight. So this is the Power Plate created by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and it has the components that you want to focus on when you're eating a whole food plant-based diet. So fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans. I would add for children, nuts and seeds as well, because we do want to make sure that they are getting sufficient calorie density in their diet. So I think that this is a great start. And then just for children, just be mindful of adding nuts, seeds, avocados, those kinds of things. Okay, so another quiz question for you. Which plant food category has the biggest bang for your buck in antioxidant potential? Is it berries, leafy greens, herbs and spices, and beans? If you've read Dr. Greger's How Not to Die, you know the answer to this question, and it is herbs and spices. They have the biggest bang for your buck in antioxidants. So where do you find antioxidants in whole plant foods? It's basically in all whole plant foods, but if you were going to put them in order of highest to lowest, then herbs and spices are gonna be the biggest bang for your buck, but also leafy greens and berries and beans are all super high in antioxidants. Antioxidants are important because they help fight acute and chronic disease. So especially in this time where we're dealing with a pandemic, we want to do everything we can to optimize our body, optimize our health, and getting as many antioxidants from food would be one of the ways to do that. Let's talk about fiber. So which plant food category has the greatest fiber content per serving? Is it vegetables, whole grains, fruit, or beans? What do you think? The answer is beans. I am a bean pusher. So remember, fiber is my favorite F word because it does so many great things. A lot of people think that fiber is just to help you go to the bathroom and stay regular, but it also helps remove toxins, excess hormones, and cholesterol. It feeds your healthy gut bacteria. We want to do that because that bacteria is doing so much for us than we actually know, and there's more and more research coming out about the gut microbiome and how important it is. But it also increases satiety. So when we're eating food that's really processed, moderately, or ultra processed, it's broken down. It doesn't have very much fiber. It usually doesn't have water in it at all. And so we just don't feel that fullness and we tend to overeat. So when we're eating diets that are rich in fiber, it helps us feel satisfied and full. And most Americans, I'm assuming probably most people in Great Britain, are fiber deficient. And this includes kids as well. So like I said, fiber, in addition to water, together, they combine to give us satiety. And when we feel satiated, we are able to regulate our appetites. It actually increases our metabolism by up to 17% to eat a whole food plant-based diet that's high in fiber. But it also gives us more insulin sensitivity. And so this is why fiber can help decrease our risk of diseases like diabetes. So how do you maximize fiber? Remember, I said I'm a bean pusher. You eat beans. So beans on average have 7 grams per serving, which is usually about a half a cup of whole beans. Vegetable Vegetables usually have about 4 grams per serving. Whole grains range from 2 to 4 grams per serving, and fruit 2 to 3 grams per serving. So as you can see, all whole plant foods have fiber. So the more whole plant foods we eat, the better. But if you really want to maximize that fiber, you want to go for the beans. Really quickly, I just want to point out that all the macronutrients are found in whole plant foods. And so we're kind of in an age where we like to demonize macronutrients, whether it's carbs or fat or whatever, but they're all important to us. So remember that whole plant foods have carbohydrates, they have protein, they have fat, but it's attached to fiber. And you know, we get concerned, a lot of people get concerned about this protein thing. It's not a concern for me. I'm not even really going to address it very much in this talk, but protein is present in all whole plant foods, and it is different percentages. So it's in varying degrees, but it's all there. So as long as you are eating sufficient calories, you're getting enough protein, but you can eat the carbohydrates, you can eat the fat, it all has fiber in it. And so we benefit from all those macronutrients. So how do you prescribe a whole food plant-based diet? Well, I like to emphasize what to put in rather than what to take out. I tell my patients, just eat more whole plant foods. Put it in every single one of your meals and snacks. Get your fruits, your vegetables, your whole grains, your beans, your nuts and seeds. And try to get to at least 75% of your meals with whole plant foods in it. But it doesn't have to be all or nothing. There's definitely different personality types when it comes to habit and behavior change and diet in general. So I think that starting here for a lot of families is just more realistic and reasonable for them. Okay, so let's talk about special considerations. So here we have 2 poor vegetarian children who, in lieu of wishbones, they use a slab of tofu to make their wishes. And I love their little shirts with the unicorn and the rainbows. So true or false? Protein deficiency is very common among vegan children. Hopefully you know the answer to this since I kind of already said the answer. So false, not common. So like I said, when it comes to calories and protein, the main thing is that you want to get enough calories. And if you're getting enough calories, you're getting enough protein. However, you know, definitely children, and I have a lot of plant-based and vegan children in my practice, they don't have a problem. But where you can run into problems is in your really little ones. So the young toddlers are supposed to run and play. They don't want to sit and eat very long, which is fine. But if you're only offering them raw fruits and veggies that are low in calorie density, then it might be too much roughage and not quite enough calories. But you just have to make sure that you are following along with your pediatrician, the growth curves, make sure that they're doing well. I just point this out because it's a possibility. I don't see it happening very often. But in these cases that get media attention where, you know, there's vegan children or quote vegan children that die, they're not eating a diet that gives them adequate calories. Like the ones that I've heard of, they're just being fed juice, completely raw food diets, and probably not consuming enough. Whenever you have a very little tummy and very little attention to wanting to eat large volumes of food, which toddlers are not going to do, you have to make sure that you're getting the beans and the nut butters and the avocado and those kinds of things in there, and then following the growth curve along with a health professional. Okay, calcium is another one that people get concerned about. There is plenty of calcium that can be found in whole plant foods, particularly in beans, greens, and fortified foods like calcium set tofu, fortified orange juice, and plant milks. Rohini told me at the beginning, before we got on, that in the UK, there's not as many fortified foods available, maybe more and more something that might be available, but that is something that we have available in the US. And then low oxalate greens that don't bind the calcium are the ones that you want to focus on if you want to increase calcium intake. So there's going to be like kale, bok choy, collards, Chinese cabbage. Iron, again, you find it, your beans, greens, and your fortified foods. Absorption of iron increases whenever you consume it with a source of vitamin C. And a lot of plant foods have vitamin C in it. So I don't get too concerned about that, but that's just one thing to be mindful of. And again, fiber, phytates, and tannins may inhibit absorption of iron. So one of the things that you can do, which I'll address later as well, is soak beans and grains beforehand to decrease the phytates. Tannins are found in teas, so I don't generally recommend that little children be drinking tea, especially caffeinated tea, but if you are drinking that with a meal, it can inhibit the absorption of iron. And then protein, like I said, you're gonna get enough as long as you're getting plenty of calories. And then when it comes to bone mineral density, like I addressed before, we have been depending on cow's milk and dairy and all of this, but when we form strong bones, it's not just from what we eat. It's also because we're doing weight-bearing exercise. So it's important to know that bone mineral density is formed from weight-bearing exercise in light of adequate calcium, adequate vitamin D, adequate B12, and low sodium intake. And other things that are in adults can decrease calcium absorption, but for children, I would say that the sodium is one of the main ones to look at. Okay, so let's talk about supplements. All children that are eating a completely or predominantly plant-based diet should be taking a B12. Vitamin D is something that a lot of people should be considering. And then omega-3 DHA, EPA may be important. And then other ones to consider are zinc and iodine. So vitamin B12 is actually produced by bacteria, and it's one of those things that we are not consuming as much because we have changed the way we eat, the way we grow food, and it's present in animal muscle, but only because these animals have been eating the bacteria. So in modern days, factory farmed animals, they actually have to be supplemented with B12 themselves because they're not eating a diet that they used to, their usual diet, they're being fed a different diet. So they have to be given B12 vitamins. So like I said, those on a predominantly or completely plant-based diet should be taking the B12. It's cheap and it's easy and it can prevent potential complications. These are the RDAs in the USA, but what I say for my patients is if you're gonna take a B12 supplement by itself, then get one that's at least 50 micrograms per day, or you can do 2,000 micrograms 1 to 2 times per week, something like that. I tend to go based more on like a daily supplement rather than several times a week, just because habits are easier that way, but you can talk to families about what they would rather do. Vitamin D is produced in the skin from sun exposure. There are a few foods that may have vitamin D in them, but there's few natural food sources. And many people are not getting enough vitamin D because of our modern culture. We're indoors, we wear protective clothing, we're wearing sunblock, and then people with darker skin tones, they need more sunlight to produce the same amount of vitamin D, so they're at greater risk. In the US, breastfed babies are automatically supplemented with 400 to 600 international units per day. And for my patients, after they turn age 1, whether they are breastfed or not, I supplement everybody with 600 IUs per day in the UK, or up to 1,000. It kind of ranges depending on, child to adult. And in the UK, that's 15 to 25 micrograms. And I think what I saw in the recommendation from the handouts is the current recommendations there are 8.5 to 10 micrograms per day. So a little bit different. Here in the US, there are also fortified foods that have vitamin D in them, but one of the big ones is cow's milk, and I would prefer people not drink cow's milk to get vitamin D. Vitamin D is not something that is naturally present in high amounts in any mammalian milk. That's why breastfed babies are supplemented with vitamin D. So the cow's milk is the same. That's something that's added to the cow's milk. It's not naturally there. So omega-3 DHA EPA is actually produced by microalgae. So we tend to think of omega-3 coming from fish fat, but fish eat the microalgae and then it gets stored in their fat. So there are vegan algal oil supplements, thank goodness. So we can cut out the fish and go straight to the supplements if we need them. There are several forms of omega-3 fatty acids. There's the ALA form that we can easily get from walnuts and flax seeds and hemp seeds and chia seeds. And we may be converting a small percentage over to EPA and DHA, but there may be some genetic differences or other factors that may affect how much we're converting over. Currently, supplementation is recommended in pregnancy, 300 milligrams per day. There are currently no formal recommendations for children, but what I've been telling my plant-based families is to consider supplementing. For those that aren't plant-based, they may be getting EPA and DHA from eating some fatty fish, preferably ones that are low in mercury, but obviously you can bypass the fish, like I said before, and go straight for the supplement. But like I said, no formal recommendations, and this is just something that I'm talking to my families about considering. And I think that the benefits probably outweigh the risks, and I'm waiting for more research and data on that one. So zinc and iodine are two other ones, and Rohini was telling me that in the UK, iodine especially is very important. Zinc is found in grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. Just like iron, vitamin C improves zinc absorption. And this is, I would say, one of those things that can be most important to consider in children that may have nut allergies, nut and seed allergies, maybe avoiding, you know, there's some families that might be avoiding certain things. So you may need to pay attention to it in those cases. But in general, I don't worry about zinc deficiencies unless there's something like a child that has a very restricted diet for whatever reason. Just like I said with the iron, if you soak grains and beans, you're going to reduce that phytate content, so it increases the absorption of zinc. Iodine is one that here in the United States, iodized salt is more common, but when it comes to families that are more health conscious or really like to cook and get into the fancy salts, all of these Himalayan salts and these fancy cooking salts, they don't have iodine in them. So I usually recommend getting it via a supplement or seaweed, but those on formula or breast milk don't need to be supplemented until they're off. And babies, they're breastfed babies, they are getting iodine through the breast milk as well. Okay, so let's talk about intuitive eating and health at every size. So here's two moms chatting, and one mom says, "My daughter is a modern baby. She doesn't cry when she's hungry. She texts me." All right, so what do you guys think? Is it true or false that most parents of children ages 1 through 5 consider their child picky? True or false? This is very true. The majority of children are going to describe their child as picky at this age. So what is intuitive eating? I like to simplify it. For those of you that want to know more about intuitive eating and all of the principles, there's the reference is going to be at the end of the slides. It was created by two ladies, Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch, but I like to simplify it for children about being mindful of hunger and satiety. So children are born with this ability to tell when they're hungry and when they're full. When we practice intuitive eating, especially when we foster this and support this in our children and we continue it as adults, it has so many benefits. So we know that people that eat more intuitively, they have greater insulin sensitivity, glucose regulation, health markers, including cholesterol. They have better digestion because they're not overeating, they're not skipping meals, doing those kinds of things, stable weight. And one of the most important things, at least for me, is that they just gain more pleasure from their eating experience. So children, they are competent eaters, otherwise known as intuitive eaters. They display cues when they are hungry and they are full. And they, over time, they can maintain this. However, when their food intake changes, which is usually around toddlerhood, and their growth rate decreases, they're decelerating in their growth rate, they're going to be eating a little bit less. And parents get really stressed out at this time, and parents start encouraging their child to eat more, just one more bite, or, chasing them around, here, one more bite. And the kid's like trying to play and do all this stuff. And so that's when parents start to interfere with this natural ability to sense hunger and fullness. So force feeding actually decreases the variety of fruits and vegetables that children will try. But At the same time, food restriction for those parents that may be afraid that their child is eating too much actually increases food-seeking behaviors. So we're doing things that actually create the opposite reaction that we intend to create. So 85% of parents try to get their kids to eat more food, just like this. So you see this little guy, he wants to play. He's like, I'm done. Look at this huge meal that this mom is trying to feed this kid, which is also unrealistic, but we have kind of portion distortion when it comes to children. And he has obvious cues. He's like, no, I'm full. I just want to play. And she's like, here comes the airplane, trying to get him to eat more. And this is really common. I used to do it. Our parents did it. We all learn how to do this. One of the things that I also like to tell parents is that taste preferences develop from persistent and repeated exposures. Everything that we learn to like to eat, no matter what it is, we learn to like it. It's not something that we're born with. The only thing that you might argue that we're born with liking is breast milk, because otherwise, it's a bad deal. We need that to survive. But besides that, we have to learn how to like all the foods that we learn to like. And that's why we can have kids born in all kinds of parts of the world and they eat the food of their culture. The authoritative feeding style is one of the ones that's going to have most success when it comes to raising kids that will accept a wide variety of foods without stress at the dinner table. So what does that mean? Respect hunger and satiety. Do not force eating past fullness or even eating certain foods. I know that might be kind of controversial to hear, but also not restricting food. And what I mean by this is restricting access to calories when a child says that they're hungry, or overly restricting foods, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Also not rewarding with foods. I know it's so easy to reward with food. I run into that a lot at my office that, kids get a shot and the parents are like, okay, let's go get ice cream. Remember, I promised you that ice cream. I usually don't say anything, but it is one of those things that we start to develop that association. I have a negative mood or a negative experience and I'm going to go for food. And that's one of those habits that can be really difficult to change when you're an adult. But something that you do want to do is create structure around meal times and offer health promoting foods. So this structure is loving limits. So I said earlier, you don't want to be chasing your toddler around the house with food, but you do want to have your breakfast, lunch, dinner, a couple of snacks, have a flexible schedule, sit down in an organized fashion, either in their high chair, on your lap, you present the food, and then they decide if and how much they want to eat. And in fact, that's one of the skills that I try to encourage parents to learn. It's called the Division of Responsibilities by Ellen Satter. And this gives autonomy to both the parent and the child to have certain roles. So the parent's job is to decide what, when, and where the child is going to eat. So you're the one that's going to be preparing the food, getting it ready, sitting down, having the child sit down at the table. Then the child has complete autonomy to decide if they're even going to eat any of that food, and if so, how much. They may not touch the broccoli today. They may eat all of the bread today. So your job is going to be to step back, take a deep breath, and try not to interfere. Easier said than done. Even I'm not perfect at this, and I wrote a book on it. I also want to address health at every size. And health at every size has been very misinterpreted, and it's just created a lot of polarized feelings. People get really uptight about this one. And this is my definition of health at every size. The potential that a person has to improve their health, well-being, and joy through habits and behaviors, regardless of weight or body size, okay? So the potential that they have, and then health, well-being, and joy, habits and behaviors, regardless of weight or body size. Health at every size does not mean that every single person at every size is healthy. Because we know that not every lean person is healthy. We know that not every larger person is healthy, but there are larger people that are doing exactly this. they have well-being, they have joy, and they can be a larger bodied person and have these habits and behaviors. So this is why I defined it this way, to help people understand what the difference is between what's being promoted in the media or how it's being misinterpreted. So it has 3 tenets to it. The first one is compassionate self-care, and that includes intuitive eating. So Health at Every Size does encourage people to pay attention to their bodies. Eat when you're hungry, stop when you're satisfied, pay attention to how food makes you feel, but also move joyfully, move in a way that makes you feel good and not for weight loss or, you know, those kinds of end results. Also respect. So respecting the fact that we are from different cultures and ethnic backgrounds. There's going to be body diversity. There's going to be natural human differences. And finally, critical awareness. So challenging cultural assumptions. We have a thin ideal here in the United States, and value lived experiences, knowing that everybody has their own life journey. When it comes to children, body size in children, parents do get very anxious about the size of their child's body. I feel like there is a magic number when it comes to percentile. So it's one of those things that I have to approach very carefully when I talk to families about their child. But the most important thing is to follow growth trends over time. Is the child staying on that curve? Does their body size make sense for their genes, for their parents, for their family? Of course, there's going to be serious genetic and metabolic conditions or feeding issues or whatever that we have to pay attention to. That can happen, you know, it's real world, but most of the time that's rare. Like I said, take into account family body types, whether the people in the family are naturally tall, larger bodied people or petite people. That has an effect. And finally, emphasize habits and behaviors rather than weight and size. So what are they eating? How are they eating? Is it chaotic? Is everybody eating in front of the TV? Are they moving together as a family? Are they getting sufficient sleep? Or are the kids all stressed out? All of these different lifestyle habits influence our eating and influence how our body metabolizes. So it's really important to pay attention to that rather than focusing on, oh, your child is too big. You know, that doesn't help the family anyway, and it's stigmatizing and it can lead to other problems. So emphasize habits and behaviors rather than weight and size. And the reason I care about this so much is because weight bias in medicine is a real thing. So at least 1/3 of women have avoided healthcare because of their weight. That means they flat out haven't gone when they think they should go. And healthcare providers can be biased in both directions. So you see a larger bodied person and you assume that that person automatically has diseases or has, you know, heart disease or whatever, but you may see a lean person and not even think that, oh, well, this person might have cancer or might have heart disease because we've been biased to think in different ways. Also, shaming does not support patients in making more health promoting choices. I know that that's a habit that we have in the culture, is shame people by making them feel bad about their weight. It doesn't help them. So I would not condone that habit. And dieting, and by dieting, I mean purposely restricting calories, is often harmful and counterproductive. So like I said, emphasize habits and behaviors rather than weight or body size. And then really quickly, I just wanted to address this. There was a study that they did in 2017 that found that vegans have significantly less disordered eating behaviors compared to omnivores. They compared 2 groups because a lot of people assume that people are being vegan because they have an eating disorder, but in fact, that's not true. However, if you do have a patient that is wishing to transition to a plant-based diet, just talk to them about it. Examine why. Talk to them about their body image, their body dissatisfaction, if they have it, and if they think that eating this way is going to make them thinner or leaner, or if they're doing it because they have an ethical concern or environmental concern. Teenagers is one of the fastest growing populations of people eating a plant-based diet, and it's usually because of environmental or ethical reasons. And then just help them. Make sure that they're not just eating you know, French fries and Diet Coke, you know, help them get some variety, and it doesn't have to be difficult. But also for families that it's initiated by the adults, flexibility is the key, especially for the older children, and having a little bit of wiggle room in there for the kids that, you know, for social reasons or other reasons may choose to eat something different. And that's something that every family has to address themselves. So in summary, plant-based diets are safe and health promoting for children. They provide many health benefits. There are some special considerations when feeding children. You got to think about supplementing vitamin B12, vitamin D, omega-3, DHA, EPA, zinc, and iodine. And also consider feeding style and emphasis on habits and behaviors rather than weight to support health promoting eating habits. So like I said, these resources will be available to you on the slides. How Not to Die, Fiber Fuel, the Intuitive Eating book. So there's lots of great stuff there. I also have a book, A Parent's Guide to Intuitive Eating, How to Raise Kids Who Love to Eat Healthy, where I go into more detail on all these things. Lots of great social media resources. And then finally, just do the best you can. Show compassion to yourself and others and be joyful.